Discussions about the history of sports, who's the best team, best player, best coach, it can make for fun discussion. And yet on the flip side, it can also be incredibly annoying to take part in. Because so often people have their own biases, they have their own skin in the game. They either are so stuck in the historical nostalgia of the past that it clouds their better judgment to what is happening now. And then you have others that don't have any concept or grasp of historical context that get caught up in recency bias. And because the sports media, because the internet, social media tells them this is the best ever, they automatically assume it is and they run with it. And it's really frustrating for me when I see it play out like this because there's so much context that is missing. And context to me is everything. And you'll see this both with MJ stans and LeBron stans, that it's so much about defending that one guy to the point where you're dismissive automatically of the other guy, or you just bring up crap that is misleading or just flat out BS. And even as a Jordan stan myself, we have to give that full disclosure here. I do feel as though there is a lot of proper context that is missing both from the pro MJ and the pro LeBron camps when it comes to talking about the best ever. And look, I'm not just here to automatically defend MJ and automatically say he's the GOAT no matter what. Let's not even have the discussion. That's not what this is about, because I look to Walter Payton back there on the wall as a perfect example. Jordan's my favorite basketball player of all time, but Walter Payton is my favorite athlete of all time regardless of sport. And while I still stubbornly do cling to the notion that he is the greatest all-around offensive player of all time, the greatest all-around running back of all time, the Jim Brown stans can kiss my ass. Let's see Jim Brown block. Let's see Jim Brown play in an era where the defenders were actually bigger than he was. I can acknowledge Walter Payton's greatness and still acknowledge that, hey, LT is not only the greatest defensive player of all time, he might be the best player all time, period. Or it could be Jerry Rice, or it could be Tom Brady, or it could be Joe Montana. It doesn't diminish Walter Payton's greatness or his legacy whatsoever. He's still one of the all-time true greats of the game, and in all the history of the NFL, of all the seasons, of all the teams, of all the players, for him to be top 3, top 5, or if you want to go down enough, even like top 10, if anything, that further validates his true greatness. Because out of all the years, of all those players, he is the true cream of the crop, the best of the very best. And I think it's important to point that out for both MJ and LeBron. Look, if you're a LeBron defender, a LeBron stan, and you get frustrated because people don't call him the GOAT, and they call him the second best of all time or the third best of all time, what is so fundamentally wrong with that? Out of all the years, of all the teams, of all the seasons, of all the players in NBA history, people are saying LeBron James is the second or third best of all time, or they say top 5, or whatever the case might be. Like, that's the true creme de la creme. That's like Mount Rushmore of NBA stuff. It doesn't get much better than that. And maybe you think he's the best of all time. Maybe you feel he's the best of all time. But is it truly that insulting fundamentally to who you are as a person if people say he's only the second or third or fourth or fifth or sixth or seventh or eighth or ninth or even 10th best player of all time in the history of the game? He's viewed in that upper of elite echelons. He is a brand. He is a fucking icon. If people don't call him the GOAT, it doesn't diminish his legacy, for Christ's sake. And the same thing, frankly, goes with Jordan. Like, when I saw LeBron in high school, I thought, oh my God, this is the dude someday that's going to supplant MJ. I truly thought LeBron, when ended up being the GOAT, was all was said and done. And I know we've had all these years and decades, frankly, of the Jordan ball washing and all of this and being told about how great Jordan was, and he was great. He's been the GOAT for many years, yes. But even if someday somebody passes him, and you have to assume somebody will, that is the nature of things, does it diminish him at all if he is the second, third, fourth, fifth best player of all time? Abso-freaking-lutely not. We can't be so stubborn in defense of MJF that we allow it to cloud our better judgment and good sense. We should not take that personally, because at the end of the day, who fucking cares is still all-time elite type of level. And that goes for both Jordan and LeBron and their freaking stands and backers. But when talking about context, like I said, I see so much of these people talking about, no matter what, MJ is the GOAT. And then they bring up shit that is misleading and lacking full context. The LeBron stands of now, not just the millennials, but the people in the media, some of these other idiots that get caught up in recency bias. Oh, LeBron is this, and again, misleading and not providing context. And that's what I'm setting out to do here, is provide some better, more appropriate, clarifying context to this whole debate of MJ versus LeBron. I could do a whole separate video on who's the GOAT, MJ or LeBron, and I plan on doing so. But I feel like context is really needed, because this is what's so annoying and frustrating about it. So many people dig in on this side or that side. They're not willing to hear anything else. And frankly, they just don't make very good arguments. Like, I'll come to this first one. This comes primarily from the Jordan stance. LeBron's not mentally tough enough, and he wouldn't have been mentally tough enough to play in Jordan's era. Now, maybe you could say that about early career LeBron, first Cleveland Cavs LeBron, early Miami Heat LeBron. But who he was and who he is now are two entirely different players. I find it very difficult to believe that this current version of LeBron couldn't mentally hang, couldn't be tough enough to hang in the 80s and 90s of the NBA. Also, if you want to talk about LeBron and transporting him back into that time, how different would LeBron be if he grew up in the 70s and the 80s and the style of the game was different, and looking at his size and looking at his strength and his physical abilities, who's to say that he wouldn't have came in on day one and been incredibly mentally and physically tough? I mean, and again, I look at second-run Cleveland, LeBron. He's been pretty mentally tough. He could have thrown in the towel against the Celtics, put up just enough numbers to make it look like he gave a shit. But still, when it mattered, caved in and given up. And he didn't. He could have done that in the first round against Indiana. And a lot of people wouldn't have batted their eyes at him. But he's been pretty mentally tough. And I say the LeBron of now, absolutely, from a toughness standpoint, from a mental toughness standpoint, could have absolutely hung in the 80s and 90s. And I think to say so is completely ridiculous. Now, on the flip side, when we talk about statistics and using statistics, we could say math is absolute. To a degree it is. But you could also take those numbers and present very flawed, misleading arguments. For example, saying LeBron is a better facilitator and rebounder than Michael Jordan was. Well, here's the problem with that comparison. LeBron James is a small forward / power forward playing in an era without great post players. He doesn't have guys clogging the lane. He doesn't have a bunch of shot blockers that he's got to go through, around, and over. So it is easier for him to get rebounds, most certainly. Whereas Michael Jordan was a two-guard playing still in a big man's era. Like, he's trying to out-rebound all these great power forwards and centers of his time. It is entirely different. He's also playing further away from the basket. The roles are different. He wasn't quite given the defensive freedom that LeBron was to kind of float away and be away from the ball and crash the lane more. That's not LeBron's fault. That's not MJ's fault. It's just when you say automatically based off of the numbers, oh, LeBron is such a better rebounder. Actually, if you look at the historical numbers, the rebounding numbers, while they do skew in favor of LeBron, and LeBron's numbers as a rebounder are better, they're not that much greater, especially considering he's got 3 inches in height and at least 40, 50, 60 pounds on MJ. Also, when you talk about the facilitator thing, LeBron plays in an isolation-heavy league. And the recent explosion in the total number of triple-doubles throughout the league shows the flaws in using assists as a measurement of being a superior facilitator. Whereas Michael Jordan played primarily off the ball. So he's moving away from the basketball. He played in the triangle, so he's posting up and a lot. When you talk about once Phil Jackson became the head coach, he's playing that triple post triangle. So he's doing a lot of different things, but he's also moving a lot without the basketball, where you see so often now with modern LeBron and the modern NBA, you get the ball to LeBron early in the shot clock, and he pounds the thing in the floor and tries to make something happen for himself or others. And as a result, naturally, your assist numbers are going to be higher when you dominate the ball more, especially when part of your role and your expectation is to get others involved. And when I look back at Jordan in the one season he truly lined up at point guard, which was that 88-89 season, he averaged over 30 points a game, but also averaged 8 rebounds and 8 assists per game. And he was still playing more off the ball than LeBron does currently. So using numbers alone to say, oh, because LeBron's assists were better and his rebounds were better, that means he's better in both areas than Jordan. They played in different eras, different times, and different roles. It is an unfair measurement in and of itself when you look at it that way. You also got to look at these two guys and understand, as I've kind of alluded to, they've played in entirely different leagues. LeBron doesn't have shot blockers clogging the lane. He doesn't have to go through the redwoods and the sequoias down low like Jordan had to. You also look at it too, LeBron's played exclusively, entirely in a time where the three-point shot has mattered in a big way and has only grown in its significance and importance to the league, all the while being allowed to dominate the ball more because it is an ISO-heavy league. Whereas Michael Jordan played during the beginning and formative years, really, of the three-point shot. He absolutely did. So while it was there, it wasn't there for him in high school. It really wasn't there for him in college, especially as a big-time weapon. You know, it was in the very early days back then in the ACC. Jordan didn't have the benefit of having the three-point shot to work on. So you look at it and you say, why would he have worked on 23 to 25-foot jumpers? He wouldn't have needed to, because why would you take those as a two-pointer when you could try to get 15 to 20 feet? That's why so many players from the 70s and 80s had superior mid-range games to the players of now, because that's what they worked on. They didn't have to work on the three-point shot, because when they were growing up and forming their skills as basketball players, they didn't have the three-point shot. And then that's a fact. And also when you look at transposing Jordan into today's game. In today's game, Michael Jordan would still be a two-guard in a similar role, and actually a larger role, because he would be allowed to dominate the ball more. It's very easy to see how he would translate to today's game. Also, thinking about it, what would happen if Michael Jordan grew up in a time where the three-point shot was always in existence? So he would have spent his formative years as a player working on and honing his craft as an outside shooter. It's like when you say, well, LeBron's a better three-point shooter. By a little bit statistically, not that much. And again, how much of that is a product of the environment of what LeBron came up in as a basketball player versus what Jordan did? Now, like I said, it is very easy to envision a Michael Jordan translating in today's game. And think about this. Imagine Michael Jordan playing in a time without great post defenders, without great shot blockers, with a three-point shot that he would have spent years of his formative years working on and honing and developing. And oh, by the way, you can't hand check him. If he could average 30-something a game back then, where you didn't have the proliferation of the three-point shot, where you did have the great post defenders, where you were allowed to hand check and beat the hell out of him, and he could average 33, 35 a game. What the F would he do now in today's game when you couldn't do any of those things? He could average 40 easily, 45. And no, that's not hyperbole or MJ ball washing. That's a fact. But when you look at LeBron and the player he is now, what would he have been in the 80s or 90s? You could just sit there and say, well, you would just transpose him back into that time. But if he was growing up in the 70s and the 80s, would he have been allowed to become the LeBron that he became? Would coaches in his early formative years looked at him as a Magic Johnson type? Or would they have looked at him as a Dominique Wilkins type, a 3-4 hybrid kind of player? Or would they looked at him at 6'9", 260-plus pounds and thought of him as a more athletic Karl Malone type of power forward? You can't just automatically drop LeBron into that time frame and automatically say it would be exactly the same. What would happen if he had to play off the ball more? What would happen if he didn't have the three-point shot? What would happen if he actually had to go against shot blockers down low on a consistent basis? Who's to say he would have been allowed to be Magic Johnson? Who's to say that he wouldn't have been required to be more of a Dominique Wilkins or Karl Malone type? And those are great players. Those are Hall of Famers. But you can't automatically take LeBron in this modern game and transpose him back there and assume automatically it's going to fit and it's going to work. You can't. And I think that's important context to put in, is that even though they're only a couple of decades apart, the reality of their basketball worlds, the reality of the leagues that they play in, are vastly different. And even if you take LeBron back into that time, with those shot blockers, with not working so much on the three-point shot, because it wasn't as big of a weapon in the league at that time, well, let's give LeBron the benefit of the doubt and say, with those different factors, he could still be, based off of his size, his strength, his quickness, his explosive athletic ability, that he averages as much as he averages now in the modern NBA or slightly more. He still pales in comparison to MJ in terms of those numbers, and MJ transposed, even as he was in the 80s and 90s, in today's game is even more dominant because of the lack of shot blockers, the lack of great post defenders clogging the damn lane, the lack of the ability to hand check and beat the hell out of him. That is very important context to bring up. Entirely different games and entirely different leagues that both of those guys played in. And I also hear LeBron stands talking about MJ in the playoffs, talking about how he had 3 first-round exits. He got swept twice in the 86 and 87 playoffs. It took him 7 years to get his first title, blah, blah, blah. Well, he still made the playoffs as a rookie. LeBron didn't. He also made the playoffs in year 2. LeBron didn't. And in year 2, he was taking on that 85-86 Celtics team. Mind you, Jordan coming off of that broken foot that cost him 65 games that year, goes into Boston Garden in Game 1 and puts up 49 on him, and in Game 2 in double overtime puts up 63, which is still a playoff record to this day. So, as a rookie, he's losing in 4 games to a better Bucks team. When you look at Jordan's roster at that time, you think some of the teams LeBron's had are trash. Look at what Jordan had around him at the beginning formative years of his career. Then you talk about those next 2 years playing the Celtics. These are the 85-86 Celtics that go down as one of the best teams of all time, and the 86-87 Celtics, who were still a pretty good team, even though beat up and injured, and they still made it back to the NBA Finals. You're going to hold that against Jordan, that he got swept by those fucking teams? By Bird and McHale and Parrish? Are you fucking kidding me? Also, this is very important to point out. During the vast majority of Jordan's career, the Eastern Conference was the superior conference, period. Period. While during LeBron's time, the Eastern Conference has, for all intents and purposes, been the weaker conference. And even if that gap is starting to narrow now, which it is, there is still a bit of a gap. And for all those other years, especially LeBron, made it to 9 total NBA Finals now, and he's made it to 8 straight Finals. The East has been doo-doo so often throughout his career. So he dominated against weaker competition in his conference. Jordan eventually dominated against stronger competition in his own conference. Also, if we want to go there and we want to get down to the technicalities, Jordan never missed the playoffs with the Bulls. LeBron missed them his first 2 seasons. But again, you're talking about a Jordan coming out of North Carolina at age 21. Had spent 3 years playing under Dean Smith for the Tar Heels. And back then, that 84-85 team only won 30-something games. They were terrible, but yes, they still technically made the playoffs. You see how ridiculous it is to kind of use that as a comparison? Don't talk about the 3 first-round exits with Jordan, because at least his first 2 years in the league, unlike LeBron, he made the playoffs. But why are we even using that as a measuring stick? And then if we really want to get there, talking about MJ in the playoffs, MJ didn't have to go to one super team to win a couple of titles, still lose a couple of NBA Finals there, and then come back to where he originally started his career to be part of another super team, so that way he could win a championship and lose a couple other NBA Finals. Michael didn't do that. LeBron did. And I guarantee you, I don't necessarily like the whole Jordan, we went 6-0 in the finals shit. But LeBron went to multiple super teams and is still 3-4 during the last 7 years in the NBA Finals. 3-5 overall. Just saying. But then the MJ stands kind of bother me when they talk about MJ in the playoffs compared to LeBron. And specifically with MJ, there's a lot of revisionist history. And sometimes way too much simplification of the bigger picture. Yes, Michael Jeffrey Jordan was 6-0 in the NBA Finals. That is absolutely correct. But we don't know what would have happened in 93-94 and 94-95 if they would have faced the Rockets in the NBA Finals. If Michael Jordan wasn't selflessly saving the universe from the basketball-playing aliens called the Monstars, would they have won 8 straight championships? Would Hakeem and the Rockets beaten them once? Maybe twice. Who knows? Would the Knicks have beaten them one of those 2 years? Or would that young Magic team have beaten them? It's hard to know. So you got that 2-year gap in the middle there when you talk about Jordan talking about him being 6-0 in the finals. It's like, it's so frustrating to me when people sit there and say LeBron did it all by himself. He didn't truly do it all by himself, and to say so is ridiculous. And of course, Jordan didn't do it all by himself either. He played with all other Hall of Famers, most notably Scottie Pippen, played with borderline guys like Horace Grant, and another future Hall of Famer in the second three-peat with Dennis Rodman. And this whole thing was talking about Jordan, how superior he was in the playoffs, and how much more reliable he was, and how much more clutch he was. Look, he's had more signature games, more signature moments in the playoffs, and specifically the NBA Finals than LeBron James. That is absolutely true. He's had more clutch games, performances, and clutch plays than LeBron James in the playoffs and the finals, and that is also true. But we need to stop acting like Michael Jordan was the Pied Piper of everything come playoffs and that he was never bad, because in fact his history suggests otherwise. It does not diminish or change the fact that he was an incredible winner and a great champion and a phenomenal playoff and postseason and NBA Finals performer. But to sit there and pretend like he was so great and awesome that he never came up small in the clutch, that he never played poorly in the playoffs, is just absolutely crap. You're allowing your nostalgia to blind you. You're allowing yourself to be way too much of a fanboy cuck for MJ, just for the purposes of diminishing and belittling what LeBron has accomplished in his time. I think about Jordan, and there are plenty of examples. I look at 93, that Eastern Conference Finals series against the Knicks, where they went down 0-2 before they came back and won in 6. Michael Jordan in those first 3 games, including Game 3 that they won, where he went 3 for freaking 18, if memory serves me correctly. Thank God for Scottie Pippen in that one. In the first 3 games combined, he shot 25 of 77 from the field. And if you can't do the quick math, that's less than 33%. That means he was hitting less than 1 out of every 3 shots. And even in Game 6, which ended up being the final game of that series, he still went 8 for 24. Yes, he was phenomenal with the 54 points in Game 4. But Game 5 still ultimately came down, and that wasn't a great shooting performance for Jordan either. It still came down to Grant, Jordan, and specifically Scottie Pippen in the bottom of the backboard, stopping Charles Smith repeatedly. And they might not have even been in that situation to win that series in 6. He redeemed himself by being magnificent in the NBA Finals against the Suns, but he was dog shit for the most part in that conference finals in 93 against the Knicks. That Knicks team with Pat Riley as the coach and Ewing and Oakley, those dudes down low, John Starks. That was a great team. And Jordan was not great in that series. I look at the 95-96 finals. They beat Seattle in 6, yes. I heard somebody recently on the radio talking about, oh, Jordan wouldn't have lost a couple of games if Ron Harper went out. Yeah, asshole, he did in 96 in Game 4 and 5 of the finals. They were the 2 games that Ron Harper missed. They lost both of them. Give me a fucking break. And in that 6-game series, which you still wonder if it was rigged so that way he could ultimately win the championship at Game 6 on Father's Day at home in Chicago, he only shot 50% of the field from the field in a third of the games, 2 out of the 6 games in that series. He also had performances of 9 of 22, 6 of 19. And who could ever forget Jordan in Game 6 on Father's Day? He went 5 for freaking 19. That, to give you context, everybody talks about Kobe Bryant in 2010, Game 7 in the finals against the Celtics, and how bad he was. He was awful. The point I'm getting at here is Jordan in a Game 6 clincher against Seattle, a 64-win team that year with Sean Kemp and Gary Payton. He went 5 for 19. He wasn't a whole lot better. 96-97, he was absolutely terrible against the Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals. Yes, the Bulls won in 5 games, but in that series, he was just awful. He had like 1 really good game, 1 okay game, and 3 others that were complete duds. And then you go to the NBA Finals against the Jazz. Yes, you can talk about the flu game, 38 points for the King, blah, blah, blah. He also had 3 games in that series where he shot under 43% from the field. 97-98. Look at Game 7 against Indiana in the Eastern Conference Finals. He went, 9 for 25 from the damn field? That's not very good. And then 3 games again against the Jazz where he shot under 43% from the field. He had all these great and spectacular moments in games in the playoffs and specifically the NBA Finals, and that is absolutely true, and nobody can ever take that away from him. And it is still a major advantage that he has over LeBron is the fact that he got it done every time he made it to the NBA Finals and LeBron didn't, but that is still a flawed metric to use because you're talking about it solely being about the number of rings and the win-loss record in the finals, as if that totally and specifically only rests on one player. And to top it all off, again, I come back to the fact, we need to stop pretending like Jordan was always Black Moses in the fucking playoffs and in the NBA Finals, because the numbers don't bear it out, baby. It's just not true. Look, when you talk about Michael Jordan and LeBron, there's a conversation to be had. I know how I lean. I know why I lean that way. But I'm not just going to go out here and automatically fully dismiss everything LeBron does and automatically pump everything Michael Jordan did up full of smoke. Because I feel like it's incredibly disingenuous and hurts the overall validity of any argument I would potentially make. The fact of the matter remains is that these are 2 of the great legends and icons in the history of the NBA. But when people talk about this, and this discussion specifically, they need to do a better job of researching the subject matter, and they need to do a better job of providing complete and proper context, like I have at least tried to somewhat and haven't even fully done here. Oh, LeBron beat this team, that makes him the GOAT. Or LeBron went 3-5 in the NBA Finals. Jordan went 6-0. That automatically makes him the GOAT. You know what both of those arguments are? They're fucking stupid. If that's the best you got, then either you need to step your game up or shut the hell up when it comes to this discussion. If you want to at me about why you think LeBron is the GOAT or Jordan is the GOAT, then you can at me and we will have a logical discussion where I will actually provide full and complete context, unlike a lot of these other knuckleheads that you see on freaking TV and hear on radio and podcasts and see on the internet and freaking social media.